Hello, my name is Shonda and welcome to my channel Under the Needle. So I have been following along with the Deco Quilt-Along, and today starts week 6. Now I haven't done my update yet for week 5. So week 5 it was a lot of sewing. So week 5 we were to finish all of our block 3As and our block 3Bs. And it was a lot of sewing because we had to make 10 of each block, so that's 20 blocks. And in order to make these blocks, you had to make strip sets. Now, I am doing the modern throw, and because I'm doing the modern throw, I had to make 3 strip sets for block 3A and 3 strip sets for block 3B. Now, I got my block 3Bs done, right? And this is what they look like. You can see that my joints are not perfect where those little squares come together. It is not perfect at all, but I don't think you'll see it in the overall quilt. The only difference between block 3A and 3B is block 3A has an extra little square here on the corner. So basically when you're attaching this bottom strip here, before you attach that bottom strip, you're going to sew another square on here, and I'm going to show you that later. But first, I kind of wanted to give you some tips and tricks about the strip set. Now, the pattern designer does recommend that you press all seams open, and I did not press all my seams open, but there are some that I did, and I certainly pressed these strip sets open because after you make your strip sets, you have to subcut them. So I want to give you some tips of what I learned sewing these strip sets together. So this is my first time doing this pattern. I had to make 3 different strip sets, and here's strip set A. This is strip set B. And this here is strip set C. So then each of these strip sets has to be subcut into additional pieces, and the number of pieces that you cut are going to depend on the number of blocks you need to make, which is going to depend on the size quilt that you're making. But I wanted to kind of give you some best practices for putting these strip sets together, because the more accurate your strip sets are, the more accurate your final blocks are going to be. So before I go ahead and get these subcut, I kind of wanted to give you some suggestions. Let me grab my ruler because I used my ruler a lot in the construction of these strip sets. I thought I had this puppy over here already, but I did not. So first things first, when you're constructing your strip set, when you put the first, what I did was I put the first 2 strips together, so these 2, and then I put the second 2 strips together. Then I put these 2 sets of 2 together, and then I added the last strip. That's just how I chose to do mine. But I measured after every strip. And so what I would do is, let's see if I can hold this up. So this here, so like when I added, these first 2 strip sets, so I know that this is a 1.5 inch strip. So after I sew it, I should be at 1 1/4 inch. If I'm not, then I either need to trim the strip or I need to bring out Jack the Ripper and redo it. And then likewise here, this strip here was a 2.5 inch strip. So once it's sewn, so once I sewed the first piece on, before I added the second strip, I'm like, okay, so this should measure 2 inches. And if it doesn't, then something's off. And you can see here, my lines do measure 2 inches. So I'm good. And I basically just did that the entire time. Now I did get a little bit off on some of mine, but for me, if it was less than less than half of an eighth of an inch, I didn't worry about it. So you can see, I'm trying to show you here, on this gray piece here, you can't even tell, But I am just slightly off. Like, look at the top line or the bottom line. Like, I can't even really accurately show it, but I'm off just slightly, but only a tiny bit, and not throughout the entire strip. Based upon the number of subcuts that I have to make, I'm going to have a lot of this left over. A lot. So if I have an area of the strip where maybe my seam kind of bobbled a little bit, I don't have the option to not use that piece. So I'm choosing to, as I subcut, to subcut the portions of the strip that are the most accurate. Because this is about 42 inches and I only need about 30 inches. So I'm going to have a lot left over. I have 12 inches to play with. So it allows me some flexibility to choose where on this strip I want to cut. So I'm going to go ahead and get my subcuts done, and then I'm going to show you how I pinned and then sewed my my block units together to make my my block 3s. So I'm going to go ahead and pause the video a little bit, complete my subcuts, and then I'll come back and show you how I put this together. Now, like I said, when I put the block together, I did pin, and I'll show that. But even with pinning, sometimes I was not 100% precise, and I just chose to be okay with that. So I'm going to go ahead and do my subcuts and then come back and then show you how I put one of these blocks together. And yeah, I'll be right back. Okay, so I've got all of my strip set subcut. So I've got my A pieces. Those are the pieces that came from my strip set A. These are the pieces that came from my strip set B. And these are the pieces that came from my strip set C. Now, this is not in the pattern, but a best practice. When you are sewing your strips together for your strip sets, I recommend using a small stitch length. And this is why. When I was sewing these other ones together, I noticed that as I was sewing some of the pieces, you know, some of the segments from the strip sets together, I'm trying to see if I can show you here. You can kind of see where, you know, the seams have popped, right? And so I wish I had used a narrower stitch length, a smaller stitch length. I think I kind of went standard. It looks like I used a 2.0, I would say. But I would go even smaller and maybe use a 1.8 or a 1.5. I think that'll help with those pop stitches at the end. So that's just a side tidbit. So basically what we're going to do is that we're going to sew these together. So we're going to sew an A to a B, and then we're going to add a C. Okay, and so we're going to sew those together. And then the way these are joined, it's like A, B, C, B, A. So one is like the reverse of the other. So if I sew if I sew all these A, B's, and C's together, what will happen is once I've sewn them all together, then I can kind of take half the stack, flip it, and then sew the two halves together to get this inner block. And then once I have this inner block, then I can go ahead and sew the strips to the top and the to the left and the right, and then to the top and the bottom. So I guess this is supposed to be this way. So I'm going to go ahead and start that now. So I'm going to start with the pinning. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and adjust my camera so that it's more facing downward and that you guys can see what I'm doing a little bit better. All right, so I'm hoping this is a decent enough angle that you guys can see what's going on here. I'm hoping it's not, I'm trying to cut the glare so that it's not too bright, but at the same time not make it too dark. I know it's a little dark, but I'm hoping that'll improve. So here's my A piece and my B piece that I'm going to put together. And so you can kind of see where it only joins here and here. So these are the only two areas that I really care about, is where these two red squares are coming together. Well, here, here, and here. So I'm going to put pins there. So I'm going to fold my A on top of my B. And then I'm going to pin it. And so how I'm going to pin this, it's a little dark. How I'm going to pin this is I'm going to kind of put my pin in between these two seams and make sure that it comes out between the two seams on this side as well. So here's my pin. It's a little dark. I'm trying to fix the darkness. It's impossible. So I've got the pin in here. And then it's coming out in between the seams on this side. And you can't really see that. Let's see if I can provide some additional light. I've got this little LED strip here. I'm hoping it'll give me enough light to where you can see this part that I'm trying to do. But I'm uncertain. Okay. No, it's not really helping very much. Okay, that's better. So I've got the pin in, and it's going in the middle of the seam on both sides. So I'm just going to push that pin all the way down until it's like straight up and down in that seam. And then I'm going to take a second pin and I'm going to put it kind of in front of this pin and then across and behind this pin. So kind of like that. This is a two pinning technique. Okay, this is the two pin technique. I learned this from Stephanie Sebbing over at Quilt Addicts Anonymous. This is her method. So this is what I'm using. So by kind of putting your pin in there straight to kind of hold it together, and then taking that second pin and putting it like across the first pin, it kind of helps to wedge that fabric to stay in place. Now, because I pressed the seams open, to just take a pin and put it in the middle of the two seams, I found that really didn't help that much. But doing it this way seemed to make it a little bit better. So I'm going to go ahead and do this next one. You can't even see what I'm doing. So I'm just going to pin this real quick. I'm just going to pin these other two. So I've got that up and down. I'm going to take this other pin and put it in front and behind of the first pin, and then remove the first pin. I hate to pin. I hate pinning, and I normally don't, but sometimes it is necessary, and I found that this is one of those times. Now, my corners, my squares aren't completely perfect, and I'm okay with that. My goal was to just get it good enough. So I'm going to go ahead and sew these together. And I just take it really slow when I get to the pins. So you really can't see that part. I'm trying, guys. Maybe that'll be. I try to take it slow when I get to the pins. And the way that I pin it, it makes it so that I don't have to remove the pin until I get into the center of the seam. and I'm already where I want to be. Oopsie. All right, so we've got an A and a B. We're going to do that one more time with another A and another B. I am not going to pin this for expediency's sake. I'm just going to hope and sew. Just going to line things up as best I can and hope that I'm close enough. Okay, so now I've got an A added to a B. You can see I am an imperfect sewer. Like right here, you can see where my stitch goes a little wonky. I don't know if I'm going to fix it or not. We shall see. So here's the first unit that I pinned. See, we're looking pretty good here. So the pinning technique really does help. And this one here is where I did my hope and sew, and you can see that it's not quite as accurate. It's not quite, it's not off by a lot. It's less than 1/2 So it's not off by a lot, but it is off by a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to pause the camera a little bit. I'm going to add the C units to each of these. I'm going to press these open, and then I'm going to go ahead and add the C units to each one, and then I'll come back and show you how the rest of the block gets put together. Okay, so basically what you're going to do, just like I said, you're going to go ahead and I would just chain piece all your blocks. I'm not doing that because I'm just demoing one block. But what I would say is chain piece all your A's and B's, press them open. Then go back and add your C, press it open. Like just chain piece them all, then press them all open. Then once you have all of them together, A, B, C, you take half your stack and you just flip it. And then this goes together. And this is cool because the only join we have to worry about is these two. So that's really the only place that I have to pin. Yay! So I'm going to go ahead and sew that and press it open, and then show you the rest of the construction of this block. So I'm going to use that same pinning technique. So just right in the middle, can't really see. And I just want to make sure that it comes out in the middle on the other side. And if it doesn't, then I just adjust that. I just adjust it because here the pin is a teensy bit off. It's more to the gray. I want it dead center. So I'm just going to fix that. Okay, so now I'm dead center on the back, dead center on the front, and I'm just going to put that second pin in there to hold things together. So I'm going to pin it on one side of the pin and then on the other side of the pin, and that just kind of holds that spot together. And then I can take the first pin out, and it holds it together really, really well. Now, when you are pressing your stuff to one side, you don't really have to worry about this, do you? But if you are pressing your seams open and you do want things to line up, the technique that I learned over at Quilt Addicts Anonymous, I should be using a shorter stitch length here, but I find that the technique works really well. And once I get to the center, then I just remove that pin. All right, so I'm going to press this open, and this is our center. You can see here that that two pinning technique really does help with accuracy. It's a pain. I would much rather press my seams to one side, but in this case I just couldn't, because I did not want to try to figure out how all of these were going to connect and how to press them. So I just pressed everything open and I pinned. So normally what I would do here, once I get everything all pressed open, I normally like to give it a hit of best press, and I did this on my strip sets too. So once I got my strip sets all together and pressed open, I like to give it a quick hit of best press on the back and give it a press, and then flip it over, give it another hit of best press on the front and press it there, and it gives me like a nice flat surface to work with. I found that that really helped with my strip sets. And it helped with keeping these seams nice and pressed open and flat. So I'm just going to do that real quick. And you guys can't see what I'm doing over here, but I am pressing, not ironing. Especially when you make your strip sets, you want to make sure that you press and not iron. So you're literally lifting and putting down the iron and not wiggling back and forth. Because the strips, you're using 1.5 inch and 2.5 inch strips, and it's so easy for them to get a little wonky and misshapen when you're dealing with strips that small. So, or just for me, in strip sets in general are a challenge. So, I find that one, I don't use steam. So that would be another suggestion. When I did my strip sets, I'm going to grab it real quick. When I did my strip sets, when I pressed them, I pressed them from the front first. So I literally folded it over and then laid a dry hot iron. And then I just fold it, dry hot iron, fold, dry hot iron, fold, dry hot iron, all the way down. No steam. And I did not set my seam, and I'll tell you why. Because for me personally, strip sets are very difficult. I normally have wonky strip sets where it'll be a little bit wavy. There'll be like a wave in it, or it'll kind of go like, it'll have a curve to it. The strip set will have a curve to it. And I found that two things distort my fabric. One would be heat, and two would be wet heat, so steam. So the less heat that I use when I'm doing my initial pressing, the better. So it's easier for me to fold over that cold fabric and press it down. I get less distortion that way if I'm just working with cold fabric. If I take the cold fabric, fold it over, dry hot iron, fold it up, dry hot iron. So if it's like this, like just fold it up, dry hot iron, and just kind of keep going until I get it all pressed. And then once I've got that done, then I'll flip it over and then I'll press the seams open. Again, dry hot iron only. And then once I have all the seams pressed open, Then I'll hit the strip set with a little best press and then dry hot iron down the strip on the back. And then I'll flip it over, little best press, dry hot iron down the strip. Just lifting and pressing. And this way it eliminated distortion for me. That is the only way that I found, for me personally, I always get distortion in my strip sets unless I press them this way. Then once I've got everything pressed, then I might hit it from the top with some steam and just kind of glide the iron over. But that's the only way for me. It's the only way it works for me. Other than that, I get distortion. So here's my piece, and I'm going to go ahead and add my strips. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to add a strip to each side. So we'll go ahead and do that. And then I did not press this part open. I looked at how the blocks went together. I didn't think it was necessary. I hope that I'm right. I'll let you guys know when I put the quilt together. Now, again, now even though I recommend chain piecing, I would still do a test block. So before you chain piece all of your blocks, I would do a test block just to make sure, just to see how things are going, just to make sure everything is lining up, to make sure that you don't have any glaring issues in your project or in your block. So I would recommend that. So again, I'm just going to press these to one side and then go ahead and add my top and bottom strips, and we'll be done with this block. Okay, so now we are going to add a strip to the top and bottom. Now, in our other blocks, it was, we just had the center and all of the pieces around were plain. But in this particular block, when we add the bottom strip, it's going to have an extra little square over there that goes on the bottom. So I've already pre-sewn that. Easy peasy lemon squeezy. So I'm going to go ahead and add my top and bottom, and we should be measuring nicely at 8.5. So these strips are cut to size. So if it fits, that means that you're good. That your finished block size should also be good. All right, that is our top. And then we are going to add our bottom. And the extra little square goes down here on the right side of the block. I don't know if that looks backwards to you. I'm uncertain. I am going to go ahead and put a pin here. I'm not going to do the two pinning technique, but I am going to go ahead and throw a pin in here because I've got one seam that's pressed open and one seam that's pressed to the side. I probably should have just pressed these to the side. It's not too late. I think I'm going to just do that and allow the seams to nest. All right, so that's on there. I'm going to go ahead and press to one side, and this block is done. All right, so this is the finished block. I'm going to bring the camera back up. All right, so this is the finished block. Looks pretty good. I've got to make the rest of them. So these are my block 3As and 3Bs. I'm loving the colors in my quilt. So basically, week 5, last week, we were supposed to get all of these blocks done. And then this week, which is week 6, is our catch-up week. Our catch-up week started today. So this is where we catch up on all of the blocks that, you know, where we catch up from all the other weeks. So basically, I have to make 9 more of these. But I've already got the strip sets done. Of course, I've already got the subcuts done. So I can just go ahead and finish sewing the blocks. And then I'll hopefully can start laying out the quilt over the weekend, I would say. So that's going to be next week's assignment. Next week's assignment is laying out all the blocks. So my family and I are going out of town for the holidays. We're leaving on Wednesday evening and we are coming back on Friday night. So I won't be able to do any sewing during that time. And I'm also working on sewing some kind of thank you gifts to the people that are hosting us this Thanksgiving, which is another reason why I'm behind on these blocks, because I've been trying to do that. So I'm working on that, and we will see how that goes. But I'm definitely going to get these blocks done. And we'll see if maybe I can get some of them thrown up on the design wall, but I'm thinking probably not. I'm thinking when on Saturday, Sunday, when I get back, then I'll work on laying the quilt out and starting to sew the blocks together. This is put together on point, on the diagonal, I should say. So it will be done on the diagonal, which is another reason why I don't think that I'll be laying it out until the weekend, because most likely for space purposes, when I lay out the blocks, when I start it, I probably won't stop. So the goal is going to be to lay the quilt out and get the quilt top, get all the components of the quilt top sewn together in one day. That's going to be the goal. So that's all I've got for today. We've made our block. I hope that some of my tips and best practices helped you as far as pressing your strip sets, as far as using the smaller stitch length to help keep some of these seams from popping open when you go to construct this with your subcuts. So hopefully you found that helpful, and like, comment, subscribe. Let me know what you want to see. Let me know if you have any questions about the construction of this block or any of the past blocks. And I will see you next video.